Welcome to Not Entirely Unlike Tea with Christine Collins. Hey there, it's Christine Collins, and today a fun topic for us to cover is centered around the impact of specific language choices and how those choices can cause potentially more harm or more good based upon the emotional resonance of them. So when we think back to various different comments, phrases, messages that we've received over our lifespan, oftentimes we have adopted some narratives or stories that came in at a rather early age. Now, not all stories are potentially harmful or toxic. Many of them can be quite beneficial. They can help us to connect to other people. They can create stronger bonds and help us to deepen our relationships with other people, such as if we have a story around our family history or a connection to particular others that we know or that we have some type of bond with. But stories can also be toxic and harmful, such as if we receive a lot of negative feedback, hurtful comments, things that are derogatory or negative about us or about the world or life in general. And today we're looking at how the specific language choices can be dissected in order to better understand the impact of those potentially toxic or harmful comments. So looking at some of the research or the neuroscience behind this, thinking about word choices and the impact of specific words on us, in some neuroimaging studies, fMRI research can show that negative words, like even just the word no, can actually trigger the release of stress-producing hormones and neurotransmitters in our brain. There can be an activation of areas like the amygdala and other parts of the limbic system that are associated with emotion and stress response. Now, to some degree, the impact of words can be very specific to an individual. Sometimes it can come down to a meaning that we have ascribed to a particular word that perhaps another person may not feel the same way about. But in general, word choices can actually be toxic in and of themselves because there's almost always a different way to word something that can, to some extent, sort of soften the blow and make that message feel a little bit more palatable or more easy to receive. So subtle word choices, perhaps even unintentionally, can communicate hostile or derogatory messaging to specific groups or around specific traits. And those things can certainly increase stress and anxiety and negative mindset and health over time. There's also some research that suggests that reframing negative experiences using different language can actually help to reduce emotional reactivity and have an impact on the emotional processing of that experience. There have also been neuroimaging studies that show that social rejection can actually activate some of the same brain regions as physical pain, which just shows that there can be a true neurological impact and physiological impact coming in from those social rejection cues. There have also been some demonstrated connections between experiencing things like online harassment or cyberbullying and having that exposure to that specific toxic language online being affiliated with an increased rate of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal ideation. Studies have shown exposure to specific words can subconsciously influence our behavior that follows seeing or hearing those words, impacting decision making. So all of these different pieces kind of tie together to help give us the understanding of the impact that language and specific word choices can have on us both emotionally and physically. We also know from our understanding of neuro-linguistic programming that specific word choices and language patterns can influence our thought process, particularly when there are sort of subconscious messages. And some of this understanding of neurolinguistics is embedded in the hypnosis process in a more constructive way in order to speak to our subconscious, to be able to resonate at a deeper level when we're trying to change something. But at the conscious level, when words are flooding in, we're not necessarily always aware of the impact that they're actually having on us. And sometimes those messages can get embedded down at those deeper levels without us even recognizing that they had such an impact. And then years later, as we're dissecting and taking things apart, perhaps as an adult, we start to recognize those language patterns that were given to us at an early age that were almost hypnotic, that in a sense constructed our view of ourselves and of the world. So for example, if you had, say, a teacher or parent, guardian, someone influential at a very young age repeatedly giving you a message about yourself, particularly if it was a negative one, that can tend to resonate at a deep level to where you're not even necessarily aware that a story or a narrative began to form. So if you consistently receive the message that you were bad at something, you were bad at a particular activity, a particular skill, perhaps through a teacher or a sibling or even peers, and once we reach a certain age, in pre-adolescence and adolescence, those peer comments make even more of an impact. They become even more important to us. Certainly things like bullying and toxic negative comments coming our way at a young age can really impact the narrative that we have about ourselves. And of course, this can happen in adulthood too. I think the advantage is that you may have some more awareness as an adult that someone throwing certain words or phrases at you, you have a little bit more choice because you can sometimes see through them. You can begin to understand their underlying motivations. You can see that it isn't true. You can prove that it isn't true. So there are lots of resources that you may have as an adult that you didn't have when you were young. And so one of the things that I find really helpful from a therapeutic perspective is to begin to dissect those things. And part of that requires awareness. So being able to resurrect a particular phrase or comment or story and be capable of dissecting it neuro-linguistically, looking at it in terms of what were the specific words or patterns of words or language choices that had this negative derogatory impact. So if you can recall something like that, you can bring it forward, you can take it apart, and then we can look at it neuro-linguistically. So some examples of things that you can look for. This also relates to dissecting your own beliefs, which may very well have formed as a result of comments from others. So if you're taking a belief or you're taking a comment and you're dissecting it and analyzing it, you can look for patterns. One example of such a pattern would be words like always and never. These are kind of all or nothing word choices, which imply that there is no argument to be made against it. So if someone says you're always late, if someone says you never get it right, you're always messing this up, they have created a story for you that is very all or nothing. There's no room for improvement. There's no opportunity to change out of that narrative. And by dissecting that, honing in on the always, honing in on the never, that all or nothing word choice, you can diminish the impact of that and recognize that that just isn't true. That's just ridiculous. And so we can dissect that story, take it apart, and then ultimately lessen its power or its hold. And as we put it on the table and take it apart, we now have an opportunity to change it. And so in neuro-linguistic programming, as well as in hypnosis, we do bits of this. So at the conscious level, doing exactly what we just talked about, dissecting that story, taking it apart piece by piece, word by word, challenging it, looking for examples where it's false, where it just isn't true. And then at the subconscious level with hypnosis, what we do is dismantle it by adding in a new layer, building a new neural pathway, building a new story that is more positive and constructive for you. So beginning to create a story where you can do the things that you want, whether maybe that's arriving on time and the example of being late, or if you are talking about goals and success in a small business, as an entrepreneur, as a writer, as a creator, the things that you want to achieve for yourself, we can build in a new, more positive, constructive story, and we can absolutely dismantle the old ones that have been holding you back, given to you by somebody else who did not have your best interest at heart. We can diminish that old story that you've been carrying around and embed something that feels more optimistic, more hopeful, more constructive, and more approachable. And in doing so, you begin to shift your perspective of yourself and the world around you. And when that perspective shifts, you begin to make different choices. You begin to do things differently. You begin to see how this percolates out into the world around you. You begin to see the impact of the beliefs that you're carrying on the life experience that you're having. And that can be truly transformational. So I always encourage you, dissect things, take them apart, turn them upside down and inside out, and have a look at the language. Notice which words from that comment felt particularly hurtful or problematic. What was the manipulation that was underlying that toxic phrase or comment? People who are speaking to you in a way that is harmful or derogatory typically have an underlying motivation. They either want you to feel something, so something negative, perhaps it's a power grab, they're trying to make you feel smaller. They want you to do something. So they're trying to use your emotions to manipulate you into taking a certain action or behavior. Or in some cases with manipulative marketing, they want you to buy something. And so their toxic language and word choices have a purpose that serves them. And it is well worth our time to dissect and take that apart. Is there evidence that it's not true all the time? Is there evidence that it's changing for you? Is there evidence that you have an opportunity to make it different? Or perhaps it was never true to begin with. This can be very empowering. And if you are interested in trying hypnosis for the purposes of changing a narrative or story, or embedding a new one that perhaps you haven't been able to hold for yourself before, hypnosis is an incredibly powerful tool for doing that. And I offer a very, very low cost hypnosis membership that you can access round the clock on demand anytime you need it or want it, in the middle of the night when your therapist and friends and family perhaps aren't available at 3 a.m. for a phone call. You can access your hypnosis audios, and they can be a wonderful layer of support for you as you work to create brand new, beautiful stories for yourself. So I hope you've enjoyed this. And if you are liking this podcast, please do like, subscribe, share, and keep coming back for more. And until the next time we connect, I wish you the most magical and creative rest of your day. Thanks for listening. This is Christine Collins at transformcreate.com.